What's going on, everyone? John from 16 Views. It's good to be back. A few days ago, there was the Apple Fall 2023 event where they released the Apple Watch Series 9, Apple Watch Ultra 2, and then the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, and then 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. The iPhones are kind of like the headlining event, but we'll talk about everything, but we'll spend the most time talking about the iPhones. I have some thoughts, I have some feelings on the announcement as a whole, but we'll talk about that. So let's dive right into it. First things off, they released the Apple Watch Series 9, and going into the event, I was like, what else can they do for a watch, at least hardware-wise? They already have a heart rate sensor, blood oxygen. They added a temperature sensor last year. The screen goes all the way across. Like, what else can they do? The answer? Not really a whole lot. So, of course, we kind of expected just a basic internal chip upgrade. That's what we got. They're on the S9 chip now. That's basically just gonna be faster, and they've added some features that kind of work with the S9 chip that I think could probably work with older models, but it seems like they're going to be reserving it just for the Series 9. So that is now, Siri is now on device, so basic commands don't have to be sent to your iPhone and back. Things like start a workout, start a timer, that sort of stuff is all going to be done on the Apple Watch. You don't need to be connected to your phone to do that. That's kind of a nice feature. First of all, not a reason to upgrade. They added a new ultra wideband chip, I think ultra wideband 2.0 or something like that. So you can now use kind of like that AirTags feature where it tells you what direction it is and tells you, 30 feet, 29 feet, 28 feet, that sort of stuff to find your Apple Watch. That's kind of a nice feature. That was also enabled by the S9 chip and this new kind of ultra wideband chip that they've added. One of the big things, really the main feature that they were talking about, is this new double tap gesture where you can now, if you have your hands full, you can now double tap your fingers, and then that'll act as like scrolling the digital crown, or you can like answer and hang up a phone call. I could be wrong about this. Were gestures not already a feature in watchOS? Like in accessibility, I'm pretty sure you could like do gestures already, but that was really the big feature that they leaned on for this whole thing. That was in the promo video, the double tap. Reason to upgrade? Again, no, but Apple, like, come on. I know there's only so much you can do with a watch, especially when adding hardware, and they're really starting to lean into watch OS and just kind of adding more features there. But Apple, you're like, what, the richest company in the world? Like top 5 wealthiest? You couldn't think of like something else? Like, is your flagship feature for the Series 9 really double tapping your fingers? Like, come on, like we need something else. So obviously this is not something you should upgrade to if you are on the 8, the 7, maybe even the 6. So that was all kind of disappointing, and that kind of leads me to the Apple Watch Ultra 2. Again, very basic upgrades. It has a brighter screen, that new processor that allows for kind of the same things with the on-device Siri with timers and starting workouts, that sort of stuff. But there weren't really any big upgrades. It's just kind of that brighter screen, new processor that allows for a couple other things, but not really a whole lot. It's just a very basic upgrade, an S upgrade, if that. So no reason to go out and get a Ultra Series 2. Ultra 2, Ultra Series 2. If you already have the Apple Watch Ultra, you don't need to get this one. But the iPhone was the real reason we're watching. So iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, these are Apple's premium but not flagship phones. So these got some upgrades. They now have the dynamic island for last year, so now the 15 and 15 Pro are going to be uniform in at least like screen appearance. They have that dynamic island. No new features are really coming to dynamic island. It was funny, they were like showing all this like, oh, look at the dynamic island that's now on the iPhone 15, and it's just all stuff that they showed from last year with the 14 Pro. So no new features with the dynamic island, but it's now on the iPhone 15 instead of that notch. And I like it. I really enjoy the dynamic island. It's a nice mix of kind of hardware and software that just kind of makes the user interface better. They did upgrade the chip to the A16, which is the processor from last year in the iPhone 14 Pro. And if you'll remember, last year, the iPhone 14 had the iPhone 13's chip. So now it kind of seems like for the, non-Pro models are going to be using the previous year's chips. Apple doesn't really have to be upgrading. They're so ahead in the chip market and it has so much headroom for many, many, many years. So, a nice welcome chip upgrade, but nothing special by any means. Turning around to the back of the phone, the camera, that's kind of the thing I care most about as a photographer and videographer. Cameras are always the part that I'm looking forward to. So they have now switched to 48 megapixels, again, like the 14 Pro got last year. So you now have a 14 megapixel main camera, and then again another 12 megapixel ultra wide. One feature they did add is you can now shoot 48 megapixels in HEIF or HEIF, I'm not sure how to say it, but you no longer have to shoot RAW to get the 48 megapixels. You can get a condensed file, 48 megapixel photo. A cool feature that they're adding, again, more software feature, not hardware related, is automatic portrait mode. So when you're taking a picture and it senses a person or a dog, it'll automatically capture depth information even if you're not in portrait mode and kind of save it attached to that photo so you can later switch it to portrait mode. I think this is super helpful, and again, really hope they bring this down to some of the older models. In the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2, they added the ultra wideband chip, like a 2.0, like a second version of it. That chip has also made it to the iPhone 15. So now in Find My, you can use the ultra wideband chip to like find your friends if they're close enough. So it's almost acting like an AirTag. This I'm really excited for. This is a really helpful feature because I'll, be going out with my friends in a, massive group of people, shoulder to shoulder. Texts aren't going through, calls, you can't hear anyone because it's so loud. If I have the option to find my friends just by going through that like AirTag like experience with, it's just telling me, okay, they're 30 feet away, 29, 28, 27 in this direction, and I can find them that way, that would be so helpful. And finally, probably the biggest physical change that's going to be seen in the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro is we have finally, bless the Lord, switched to USB-C. Lightning is dead. It's no longer on really any current Apple products outside of the baseline iPad and the Magic Mouse and stuff. But now the newest iPhones, iPads, Macs all use USB-C. And I cannot thank Apple enough. It's so nice. I can't wait for everyone to kind of think Apple invented this new cable port where it's been around for a long time on Android. So that's the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. They're still in the same sizes. Really the only physical changes are Dynamic Island and USB-C, and then you got that new camera sensor and then just a couple hardware improvements on the inside that'll make for a couple cooler software features. So now let's talk about the best Apple has to offer in the 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max. So first off, the sides are now titanium compared to, I think, what they used to be stainless steel, and it looks so clean. I'm very excited to go in store and kind of feel it. It's supposed to make it lighter, stronger. I just think it's gonna feel really, really nice in the hands. Another physical change to the iPhone 15 Pro is the mute switch is dead. No more mute switch, and we kind of saw this in the rumors coming up, but it's been replaced by a customizable button that you can still use to mute and unmute your phone, but then you can also program it to open the camera, open your flashlight, or start any shortcut you want. So this basically gives you unlimited possibilities with what you can do with it. As for the chip that they've added, we're on the A17 Pro. That's the first time that they've ever made the iPhone chips Pro. To my knowledge, I think this is the first smartphone chip that's been on a 3nm process. So that basically just means it's going to be faster and it's going to be more efficient. I'll take that any day. Better battery life and better performance, that's pretty great. So this chip should be really, really good. And they talked about gaming a lot. I was surprised how much they talked about gaming, because apparently the new GPU on this chip is supposed to be insane. I'm not gonna, rattle off the 20% or whatever faster numbers, because that doesn't really matter. But I was surprised how much they focused on gaming and how this chip is now capable of ray tracing. And this is all great and cool and awesome. But if you're that serious about gaming, let's be honest, you're not gaming on an iPhone. You're gaming on a PC or a console. So all this stuff they're talking about gaming, I felt it was kind of unnecessary. It was more of a space filler because no one is really that serious about gaming on an iPhone. And I'm not a huge gamer, so I could be wrong about this. And maybe there's a market for that I don't recognize. But I kind of saw it as more of a space filler and something that isn't really going to be used because I don't think a lot of people like game on iPhone. And just like the iPhone 15 Pro is also getting USB-C, but 3.0 speeds, which is up to 10 gigabits, I believe, which will be so nice when you are trying to transfer ProRes files, because you can shoot ProRes on iPhone now. When you're trying to transfer ProRes files to your Mac, and it isn't going to take 3 hours to transfer 100 gigabytes of files. So really like that. Didn't come with faster charging speeds though, which sucks. I thought this would have been a good opportunity for them to add, 30, 40, 50 watt charging, but no, it's still stuck at the 20 something or whatever, but at least you get those faster speeds. So, of course, the part that I was most excited about, the cameras. They opened it up and said that you will now have equivalent to 7 focal lengths. And I was like, back the truck up. 7 focal lengths with 3 cameras? Like, what? Turns out 7 focal lengths is a little bit of a stretch. So they've added a feature in the main camera, so you can set your default zoom amount for the main camera. So you can set it to 1, 1.2, or 1.5, which I believe was a 25, 28, and 35 millimeter equivalent. So you can just kind of set that as your default. I don't really know who would use that. Maybe people who find themselves wanting to zoom into 1.2. I don't really know. That was 3. And then they included the ultra wide plus macro. So that's 5. And then the 2 times, which is just the crop on the main sensor, and then the telephoto camera. So those are your 7 focal lengths. A little bit deceiving, but okay. Software feature where you can now change your focal length through the main camera. For the first time in a couple years, they've now differentiated the Pro Max and just the Pro. On the Pro, you still got your normal 3 times telephoto camera, the one that's been on the 14 Pro, same focal length. But on the Pro Max, it's now a 5 times telephoto. So this is equivalent to 120 millimeters, really gonna get that zoom in. And this, they're quoting it because the Pro Max had more room, because to get something equivalent to that focal length in a smartphone, you have to bounce the light a few times because the sensor has to be far enough away from the lens. And so they're saying that only the Pro Max had enough space to be able to bounce that light 4 times to the sensor. Really? Or did you just want to differentiate them? But anyway, on the 15 Pro Max, you're now going to have 5 times instead of 3 times. I don't really know how much you need 5 times. I feel like 3 times is kind of perfect, and I almost would rather have 3 times than 5 times. I've never really been using my 14 Pro Max and zoomed into 3 times and been like, shoot, I wish I could get 5 times or a little bit closer. Because maybe I need 3.5 times, and then I'll just crop in a little bit and it's fine. What I really was hoping they would do is, I don't know which phone it is, but one of the Sony phones has variable telephoto where it could go between 3 and 5 times, so the optical lens would physically move inside the phone and you could get a variable distance. If Apple could have done that, oh, that would have been so cool. And that's something I would understand if they could only do on the Pro Max, because that you literally need the lens to move. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. It's just stuck at 5 times. And so if you want to get to 3 times, crop in on that 48 megapixel sensor, I guess. I was watching the keynote, I was like, oh, cool camera upgrades. You can now shoot in log profiles on ProRes. All of that stuff is still the same. But then the next day I was reading an article that said Get Him Back, the new Olivia Rodrigo song from her new album Guts. They released a music video for it, and it was shot entirely on the iPhone 15. So I went and I watched the video because, hey, I love me some Olivia Rodrigo. But I was really impressed. If I wouldn't have read that article that said it was shot on iPhone 15, I wouldn't have thought of it. I would have been like, oh, this is just a normal cinema camera. I was really impressed. So if you want to see the capabilities of the iPhone 15 Pro, especially in video, I would watch Get Him Back music video by Olivia Rodrigo. And keep in mind, they're definitely shooting in ProRes. And they're using hundreds of thousands of dollars of gimbals and lighting equipment and special effects and all of that. So yes, while they did shoot it on the iPhone 15 Pro, they had a lot of help. But it's still really, really impressive what it was able to put out. All the phones start at the same price. 15 Pro starts at $1,000, but the 15 Pro Max now starts at $1,200. but for 256 gigabytes. So they're no longer offering 128, which would be 1100. It just goes straight to 256, which is the same price that it was last year for 256. But there was also a 128 model that was for 1100. But now they've completely omitted that. No 128 model. It's now starts at 256, 1200. So it's not a price hike, but the starting price is higher, if that makes sense. I'm not really sure why, but that's what happened. So yeah, that is the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro event. Fairly small upgrades. Thank you for adding USB-C, even though I know they didn't really have an option because of some of the lawsuits that were coming out of the EU over the past year and a half. But I am really, really happy to have USB-C and finally to really only need one cable to charge all of my devices. I'm John from 16 Views. See ya. How long was that? 32. Oh. Okay, yeah. It's good to be back.